Welcome to the next session of our cruise planning and cruising course. Tonight we're going to cover Chapter 8, Dealing with Communications on the Water. This chapter is going to cover basically the VHF radio, your medium frequency and high frequency radios, watches, satellite systems, marine safety information, cell phones, and Wi-Fi. This course is not a technical course on marine communications. Please see the Marine Communications course or one of the many related seminars on communications topics. In this chapter, we will describe the use of marine radios for safety and general communications while cruising. We also cover other options for communicating. From wireless telegraphy, we're talking about the telegraph, to wireless networking, marine communications have evolved dramatically over the years. In the early days of marine radio, ocean-going ships sent messages via radio telegraphy, or the telegraph, to coast stations and other vessels. Today, many options exist for vessels of all sizes to communicate, navigate, and collaborate. The VHF radio remains the cornerstone short-range marine communications by radio telephony, which means two-way voice communications, but for the inland and coastal cruiser, now we also have Wi-Fi and cell phone technology that provides easy access to shore facilities and to family and friends. Commercial and recreational vessels are fitted with VHF radio for a range of purposes, including distress communications in time of emergency and routine communications with marinas, bridges, locks, and other vessels. The radio transmits and receives in the VHF or very high frequency range between 156 and 162 megahertz. The frequency spectrum is divided into discrete channels that are designated for particular use. Boaters typically use non-commercial VHF channels. Internationally, channel 16 is reserved for calling other stations and distress alerting. Channel 13 should be used to contact other vessels when there is a danger of collision. On the VHF radio, you can have a handheld or a fixed mount, and of course, they're in-harbor use, low power with 1 watt. Cruising uses high power, 25 watts, or typically our line of sight is the limit of the range of the communications, 10 miles. Typical VHF marine radios are synthesized all-channel solid-state transceiver units containing 1 transmitter and 1 or 2 receivers. Transmitters are limited to 1 watt of radio frequency RF output in the low-power mode and 25 watts in the high-power mode. The communications range is generally limited to a line of sight between the transmitting and receiving stations. It is 5 to 10 nautical miles with antennas mounted on small boats. So when you're using your radio, once you key your mic, you're preventing anyone else from broadcasting on that same frequency. If you're initiating a call on channel 16, once you key your mic, you are the only person in that area that can use that frequency. And so that's why we recommend using the lower power ratings if we're within close proximity, because then someone 10 miles away, for example, can also be using that channel 16. Most VHF radios offer additional features beyond the basic transmit and receive functionality. For example, many radios have a built-in hailer that can function as a public address system if your vessel is equipped with like a deck-mounted loudspeaker. More sophisticated radios use alphanumeric keyboard entry, GPS position data, voice scramblers, and other technologies to increase capabilities. The voice scrambler, bear in mind, when you're on your VHF radio, your broadcast is being received by anybody with a radio. So it's a big party line. DSC, digital selective calling. The technology enables user to send an automatically formatted distress alert to the Coast Guard or other rescue authority anywhere in the world. DSC can also be used to initiate routine radio telephone calls to or from any vessel or shore station fitted with a DSC radio, with no need for either party to be near a radio loudspeaker. Figure 8.1 in the text is a picture of a VHF radio with a DSC marine feature that provides boaters with a range of capabilities. And it does say radio telephone, which means that you can call a marine operator with a VHF radio and actually make a phone call. But again, your voice broadcast, whatever you say, can be picked up and received by anyone else monitoring that frequency. So be careful about giving credit card information if you have to make a marine radio telephone call using a marine operator. Marine VHF radio telephone calls to another vessels are normally initiated using low power on an appropriate VHF calling channel, either 9 or 16. So let's just decide that we want to establish a call. We want to call tuna time, make a call, and our boat vessel is Paula 1. So we're going to check the radio to be sure you're on channel 16 or 9. Right now, FCC requirements are that if you're underway and you're on the water, you've got a radio, it's got to be on and you're monitoring 16 at all times. Many radios have a feature that you can scan. You can scan the whole thing. If you're interested in what's going on out there, you can scan almost all the channels. But particularly if your radio is scanning, anybody that transmits your radio will stop on that channel. So in our case, the format of our call is going to be sort of like tuna time, tuna time, tuna time. This is Paula 1 calling on channel 16, over. By saying over, I've ended my transmission. Tuna time maybe have their radio on scan. They may have heard my call, but not sure what channel I called them on. And so in the BVIs, for example, if Jerry's got everybody sitting on channel 71, ideally you should be monitoring channel 16, which is your hailing frequency, and you may be also scanning channel 71. But if you call on 71, someone may come back and try to answer your call on channel 16 and you won't be there. So that's the reason why you make your initial contact and then tell them confirm what channel you're calling on. So the frequencies that are available typically are channel 68, 69, 71, or 72. And then after you make that contact, if Paula 1 comes back tuna time, this is Paula 1, go to 68, go to 69, go to 72. And then tuna time would say 68, boom. And then you go ahead and change your radio, then reestablish that same conversation. Tuna time, tuna time, tuna time. This is Paula 1. I'm sorry. Yeah. This is Paula 1 calling on channel 71, over. And then Paula 1 should be there on, or tuna time should be on 71 waiting for your call. Does that make sense? All marine VHF radios operate in the radio telephone mode, so newer radios also have a DSC capability. In the radio telephone mode, operators use the spoken word to establish contact and exchange information. In the DSC mode, digital signaling methods on channel 70 are used to establish initial contact. Follow-on communications are conducted by radio telephony on an appropriate working channel. Be sure to register your Maritime Mobile Service Identity, that's your MMSI number, and number 2, enable instant identification of your vessel. See the USPS website for information. MMSI communication is still relatively new, but it's something that if you've got people that you know, and your MMSI number is a number that that's registered with the Coast Guard, you can get MMSI numbers assigned to your radio and your vessel, either through, like Boat US can do it, you can get them through USPS, and it puts all the information about you, the owner, the description of the boat, all that pertinent information that if there's an emergency, you don't want to be spending time describing your boat, and so, well, it's a white boat and it's got a blue sail or a white sail, and finding the other distinguishing marks or whatever. So The MMSI, that it would already be established for the vessels, like in the BVIs, that MMSI number would already be established for that vessel. Okay, and that's something to be aware of, and you really need to spend some time working with that concept to figure it out. I've got it on my boats. I still don't. A lot of the other boats that I boat with up in Bayfield don't also have that feature, so it's not something that we use on a regular basis. Okay, the marine frequency or medium frequency, high frequency radios. Basically, that's a lower frequency, a longer wavelength, which tends to follow the curvature of the Earth. And that gives you a much greater distance for communications. Figure 8.2 shows a typical medium frequency, high frequency radio. It's a single sideband radio telephone. 60 watts is on low power, 150 watts for high power. Much, much greater range than VHF. For coastal cruisers over 20 miles offshore, and it also has DSC available. Calling procedure is same as VHF, and Coast Guard monitors specific frequencies depending on your area. But yachts and offshore cruisers and larger recreational vessels may be fitted with medium frequency and high frequency radios for long-range communications. These radios transmit and receive in the medium frequency, that's 2 megahertz, and high frequency, 3 to 26 megahertz frequency range. The International Telecommunications Union, the ITU, specifies medium frequency and high frequency channels used for marine telecommunications. Recreational boaters may use appropriate medium and high frequency channels to contact other vessels and the Coast Guard or Coast Guard stations ashore. Typical medium and high frequency radios are synthesized, all-channel, solid-state transceiver units containing one transmitter and one receiver. The radios use single sideband modulation techniques for radio telephone communications. Transmitters are typically limited to 60 watts of RF output in the low power mode and 150 watts in the high power mode. The communications range can extend to thousands of miles between the transmitting and receiving stations. The distance will vary depending on many factors, including the time of day, frequency band selected, and other conditions that influence the atmosphere's ability to propagate radio waves. Modern medium and high frequency marine radios incorporate DSC technology to send a semi-automated distress alert to the Coast Guard or other rescue authorities. DSC can also be used to initiate or respond to routine radio telephone calls from other vessels or shore stations fitted with appropriate equipment. The DSC technology, there is no need for the sending station or receiving station to maintain a manual listening watch or any particular channel. The one thing about the medium and high frequency radios, they are required, there's a license required if you have one of these radios on board, and there's a ship station license that's required, basically is assigned to that radio station and the vessel documentation. And the operator must be on board and must have a restricted radio telephone operator's permit, and then at least one crew member designated as a crew. But the FCC administration requires that you do have to have a permit holder. So VHF radio telephone watch. If your boat is equipped, that's got to be turned on. That's got to monitor channel 16. You can select dual watch with channels 16 and 9, and then whatever operating channel that you want to go to. Makes it easy to get back and forth. And then even with your medium and high frequency radios, you've got to have them turned on and monitor the DSC channel or the medium frequency channel of 2182 kilohertz. At this point, I'm going to break the presentation and can call this part 1. Hope to see you back for part 2. And okay.